So this is obviously final reading of the ordinance that we have proposed to amend the charter. The plan is that this charter amendment, if approved by the City Council, would be on the ballot for the general election on November 8th of 2022. So as the clerk read into the record, this would establish residency requirements in terms of time. It requires that a candidate be a resident of the City of St. Cloud 12 months prior to the date of qualifying, as we've talked about in the past. The last version that you saw, this ordinance, we've amended it a little bit, revised it a little bit to add in special information related to what would have to be shown, actually specified proof of residency that would have to be presented to the city clerk.
Would anyone in the audience like to speak to this item? Mr. Messner, David Messner. Meisner.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to address this. I oppose this. I read it. I understand it. The city has been in business since 1909 to present. Has there been a problem with this? If not a problem, why are we doing this? I question it. The last sentence on what I have says basically the 5 members of the council will decide who can run against them. I question that. I question the legality and constitutionality of that. And please, Mr. Menseris, if you would take a look at the last sentence, the city council shall be sole judge of the elections, returns, and qualification of its own members. So basically, 3 members that are running for election this November will also be able to tell who is running against them and check their qualifications. I question the need for it. Has there been a problem since 1909? It's a question for the city attorney, please. I'd like an answer.
Mr. Menseris.
With regard to the judge of qualifications, that is language that is set forth in the charter, has been in the charter since the inception of the city's charter. The city council is a municipality under home rule authority. The city council has the ultimate authority to decide everything that happens in the city with regard to the government, including the election. So that is pretty standard language, and it is supported by the Constitution, the Florida Constitution, specifically the Florida home rule provisions of that. With regard to whether this has been an issue, there hasn't been an issue that is raised to the level of the city council. There have been some issues in the past regarding residency of candidates, and this would just provide this as basically an extra step if needed to establish residency, as well as provide for the minimum requirement prior to qualifying.
I like it. We have had problems with this before, Mr. Meisner, and this is what happens. Like, nobody takes responsibility, nobody checks, there's not a process or procedure. So that's why we're recommending this. This has to be voted on by the voters. So you can cast your ballot, when this shows up on the election. The intent is that the clerk is going to be verifying this, but if there is a dispute still remaining after that, then it would be elevated to the council. So the clerk is intended to be the person who's verifying this data, but I like it.
Thank you.
Sorry for the
I have to agree a little bit with Mr. Meisner of if it isn't broke, don't fix it. But even with all of this, if someone's going to lie on a government form, they're going to lie on this, and they'll lie about a lease or something else that they've lived here for a year or so. If people are going to be untruthful, then they're going to be untruthful. I have a couple questions of so if you live here your entire life, you move away for a bit and then come back less than 12 months before the qualification for an election, you just can't run, even though you've been here 30 years, 40 years.
It requires a continuous 12-month residency prior to the qualifying date.
And documented residency too.
Yes.
So if someone moves back in with their parents or something, they don't have.
Right, but we also, that's why that language is in the ordinance that allows for the provision of other verifiable documentation. So if someone can provide other information that would show that they'd been here, even though they've been living with their parents for a while and the house is in their parents' name, then that would be acceptable.
Okay. And then my biggest grief about this is there's a lot that can happen in 12 months, and there's a lot that the city or even the city council can do to make the residents mad in 12 months. So if we do something, we force annexation of a bunch of property, and those folks that didn't live in the city now live in the city, but they weren't at the time, and they have to wait 2 or 3 years to run for council because they're mad about something. It just kind of prolongs that time frame, right? So like if we double taxes and annex them or something, or do something like that, as long as it happens more than 12 months before qualification for the next election, then they can do something about it. But if not, then I don't know. And then I know City of Kissimmee has this. I imagine there's other cities that have this qualification period. So I don't know. I just think that if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Well, that's where I would disagree. I believe it has been broke because the language is not clear about residency. It has certainly been taken advantage of. And so all that we're trying to do is to clear up the language to make it very clear what it means to be eligible to run. You have to be a resident. Most all the city councils that I check into have very similar language and the same similar requirements, that you should live in the city for 12 months to justify your running for city council. So I'd like to make a motion that we adopt this alternative resident requirement, that it can be submitted on the ballot. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second for Councilmember Matheny, a motion from the mayor. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Councilmember Urban.
Aye.
Councilmember Askew.
Aye.
Councilmember Trace.
Nay.
Deputy Mayor Matheny.
Aye.
Mayor Blackwell.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-1.